and Mary. Okay, yeah, we'll make sure you. So we've got some paper copies, and it's gone out. I've written an article about the God grows the seed, and as we're going out onto the streets, it's good to know that we go out and we share, but it's what God's doing. So have a read of that. It's good. It's good. Some of the things on here have actually already passed by now, but anyways. If you want to go to the Pie and Pea night, unfortunately you missed it. It was last night. But it was really good, so make sure you check out the next one. So the gospel delivery, we are praying here at 6 o'clock, while 8 on Tuesday evening as well. I don't know if that was mentioned, but also going out onto the streets and sharing, going out onto the houses, knocking on doors, and starting to give out the gospels. Me and Phil started ours last week, didn't we, Phil? Got your shades on today. You okay? You incognito? You're hiding at the back? Yeah, bit of a headache this morning. And he was great, just knocking on. I was talking to Todd Alexander, who was the illusionist last night, about it. The fact that we're going onto the streets, and he was like, "Wow, that's quite old school, isn't it?" I was like, "Yeah, it is. It's really old school." But absolutely loved it. Just being able to, me and Phil had two significant conversations with two guys, and one of them just really, at the wit's end, and we were able to just pray, and just a moment of, had we not knocked on his door, he would have never crossed the doors of this church or a church, and yet we were able to go and to be where he was, which is incredible. Another guy who is kind of not sure about church anymore, has been involved in church, but we were able to talk to them, and they may come to this church at some point in the future, might they, Phil? So we're praying for them. So just if we don't knock on these doors, some people were like, "No, thank you," and I was like, "Okay, that's all good," and move on to the next one. So this is what the article's about. But next Saturday we are going on to the shops to give out Yorkies. So we're giving out Yorkies and invitations to our Father's Day Cafe Church, which is on the 21st of June. So we're having breakfast together on that day. So 21st of June, we're having Cafe Church. So it's going to be great. So have I done that announcement suitably? Yes, we know what we're talking about. Yes, I've got the thumbs up from over there. That's good. That's good. Right. So I'm going to start. Been one of those mornings this morning. So Joshua's gone off to play football at a tournament, and as he woke up, he was like, "I don't want to go on my own." So he was meant to be getting picked up by another parent, and then he was like, "I can't go. Can one of you guys go with me?" I'm like, "Well, Mum's leading worship, I'm preaching," and so I was like, "What do we do?" And he was like, "You do both." Okay, I was like, "Okay." Perfect solution, Josh. Well done. There we go. So here we are. So it's been one of those all different angles. Anyway, so we're talking about the parable of the persistent widow this morning. I can remember as a child, I longed for my dad to give his heart to Jesus. That was my heart's desire. I was raised in a Christian family. Well, my mum was a Christian. I used to go to Sunday school, used to go to a United Reformed Church, so it was quite formal. A lot of the time I used to go to football on a Sunday morning, so I'd sometimes go to church, mostly go to football. But my mum was a strong woman of faith. She was a tenacious, fearful woman of faith. But my dad was a businessman. He was much more into his holidays, loved going different holidays. He had lots of different cars, and his aim was to climb the ladder of success. That was his main aim in life. And I can remember going to Christian events when I was a child. And although I was young in faith, I remember going to these events, and there'd be that moment where the appeal would come, and the quiet music would come on, and they'd say, "Would anybody like to give their hearts to Jesus?" And I'd be there trying to put my dad's hand up. I'd be like forcing him to put his hand up, and he just didn't do it. And then I vividly remember being in a car park somewhere in Rotherham, might have been at the library. Maybe I was about 7 or 8, 9, something like that. And I was crying my eyes out for my dad because I was just so sad. I was like, my dad's going to go to hell. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when he died, and I was just heartbroken. And I guess in those moments, was I praying? Was God listening to the cries of my heart when I was crying? My mum lived a faithful life of witness and prayed for my dad for years and years. And my dad eventually did become a Christian. Yes. 25 years of praying, my mum faithfully prayed for him. And he quickly went into ministry. He went to Bible college. He went to Elim Pentecostal Bible. Well, he went to, did a ministers in training. And he became the pastor of Mosborough Elim Church. Does anyone know where that is, Mosborough Elim Church? Yeah. In fact, Andrew was the pastor there for a bit. Yeah. Anyways, so that he went on this journey. I remember him being a successful businessman. He went from, this is not what happens all the time, but he went from driving a Jaguar to driving a Lada. That doesn't mean that when you become a Christian you go downhill. It's just, unfortunately, God knew it was in hand. He worked on his heart, and amazing. Sadly, then, after about not long of him being a pastor, about 5 years, I think it was, he got a brain disease called supranuclear palsy, which is a mixture of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And he became like a little child, actually, and it was really a hard watch for us as a family. And we used to dress him in the morning. In fact, there was this one funny thing. He would walk round to the shop to get himself a newspaper. That was his little space. He'd walk round, and then one day he couldn't go, so my mum went to the shop and she picked up his newspaper, and she went, "Oh, have you come for Nigel's newspaper and his Kit Kat?" And she went, "Kit Kat? What do you mean Kit Kat?" He was sneaking off and having a Kit Kat as well. He was diabetic. He wasn't meant to have chocolate, so he got into trouble for that. But he was such a legend, and even when he was in his sickness, you see the grace of God on his life. And in fact, it was really sad. The last sermon he preached, we were there in church, and he didn't realize it, but he preached back-to-back sermons because his brain was bad. So he preached for an hour, and I remember sitting on the front row crying, just like, wow, this man's gone. His brain was gone. And in fact, this is an interesting thing for me to work through, but as I was preparing this, I've been having this weird thing go off at the minute. So when I'm walking in a straight line, it feels like, doctors, don't diagnose me yet, but it feels like my balance has gone. I feel like really wobbly. I don't know what's going off, and I need to go to the doctors. Yeah, I do. But it's been getting worse. I'll go and walk and I'm like wobbling. And then I was searching how to spell supranuclear palsy. And so I Googled it, and I was like looking at the symptoms. And the first signs of it is that you start to wobble when you walk. So yesterday I was like, oh my gosh, could this be happening to me? So don't worry about it. Just pray for me about it, okay? But this fear came over me. So just an interesting aside. But I'm still, I don't know what's going on there, but I'm trusting God in the middle of it all. So just pray for me in that. Anyway, so the story gets loads better, honestly. He became a Christian when he died. So he had a brain hemorrhage when on Christmas Eve 20. This sounds really sad, doesn't it? I'm sorry. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. On Christmas Eve 2002, he had a brain hemorrhage. Ended up being in a coma for 3 years. And then, sadly, he passed away at the age of 60. All very sad. It was a horrible time for us as a family. And I remember, but this is the amazing thing, I remember at my dad's funeral, I was speaking to one of my granddad's friends, and my granddad was still alive, this guy called Henry, and a faithful man of God. I used to go around to Henry's house and watch Sky Sports, because we didn't have Sky Sports, and he was massively into Manchester United and his golf. But Henry was 105 years old. Yeah? And at my dad's funeral, he said, "Do you know that I prayed for your dad for 40 years?" I was like, wow. Thank you so much for your faithful prayers. And, we know that Jesus answered those prayers because he is now with Jesus, which is a way better place to be, isn't it? So I'm not sure how it works, but I do know there's a spiritual battle going on for souls. There's a spiritual battle going on. My dad was sick. We prayed when he was in a coma. We prayed, consistently for those 3 years for him to get healed, and he didn't get healed. The outcome of our prayers is not our responsibility. We are simply taught to keep on praying. So we're going to read today's parable, which is from Luke 18. If you got it, it might be up on the screen. So it's 1 to 8. It said, Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them they should always pray and not give up. He said, In a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with a plea, Grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused. He finally said to him, Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see to it that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me. So it was for his own gain, wasn't it? Didn't want battering off a widow. And the Lord said, Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? So, a persistent widow. I know what a persistent widow is like. My mum was a persistent widow. They can be relentless. She was relentless, my mum. But she was tenacious. And this sounds like this one was as well. This parable is one that's not, a lot of parables are kind of ones that you kind of have to work them out. Like, what does it mean? But this, right from the start, he points out the parable, what it means. It says, the parable is to pray and not give up. Perfect. We can all go home then. It's easy, it's simple. Jesus says that if it was an unjust judge granted the request of a persistent widow, a judge who didn't fear God, didn't fear man. This judge was hard-nosed. He was hard-hearted kind of person. And then you've got a widow who was the lowest of the low. In those times, women didn't have much of a social standing. They didn't have any backing financially. And so he's presenting these two kind of scenarios, these two extremes of the judge who's hard-nosed and the widow who's got nothing. And Jesus says, if that kind of judge would grant justice, how much more then am I a good father would bring justice to his chosen ones who cry out day and night. I don't always understand prayer. I don't know if you do, how it works. We prayed for my dad's salvation, and it came to be. Someone prayed for 40 years for that. We prayed for my dad to be healed night and day, and he didn't get healed. But the point was still the same, isn't it? To keep on praying, to keep on going, to keep calling on him day and night, it says. I know which prayer I would rather have had answered. It's okay to say, oh, there's a healing, but it's way more important than my dad's salvation. My dad's salvation is secure. I would rather take that over the temporary comfort of this world of being healed. So, if anyone's in a situation of injustice, or it's a tough one, the lesson is to keep on praying. We're not going to an unjust judge. We're going to a good father. We won't annoy God with our prayers. He won't get frustrated with us. He's a good father who wants us to keep coming to him. That's the promise of this parable. But then it takes a shift. The question, he says, however, when the Son of Man comes, will I find faith on the earth? Will we keep going in prayer, contending for these things, even for the broken relationship that remains broken, for the sickness that remains unhealed, for the lost soul that remains lost, for the injustice around the world that remains unjust? How do we keep faith in these things? It's tough. It's tough to keep going. Psalm 42 says this, if you want to read along with me. Psalm 42, it says, As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with my God? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, Where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I used to go to the house of God under the protection of the Mighty One, with shouts of joy and praise among the festival throngs. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Saviour and my God. My soul is downcast within me, therefore I will remember you from the land of the Jordan, the heights of Hermon, from the mount of Mizar. Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfall. All your waves and breakers have swept over me. By day the Lord directs his love. At night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I go about mourning, oppressed by the enemy? My bones suffer mortal agony as my foes taunt me, saying to me all day long, where is your God? Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Saviour and my God. This psalm encourages us to dig deep, to dig into the deeper things of God, to keep pushing into God. And I think that's the point of the parable, to keep calling on him day and night, to keep digging deep, to keep grappling, to keep pushing further and further into God. And it's in those places that we will find the peace of God, the presence of God. I think that's what he wants us to do. We're so distracted. There's so many things that would take us off. It's easy to fix our eyes on the problem rather than on God, who's the solution to the problem. And I think it's in those moments that peace does come. And that, I would say that was our testimony as a family as we journeyed with my dad. Praying all that stuff, I truly believe that even though we were going through a horrendous time, that there was a peace of God that passed all understanding, because there was a digging deeper into God. This is about going in praise, about how our praise takes us into a deeper place. And that's where actually I think our prayer should start. It should start with praise in a place of worship to God. And that's where we truly find out how we get beyond the problem. So I encourage you, if you're in an injustice, a place of disappointment, of lacking in hope, that praise is the place to start in order to get into that place of knowing God's peace. There's a vision in Ezekiel 47 where the prophet has this vision of water flowing from the temple. And he wades in first with his ankle deep, and then his knee deep, and then his waist deep, and then he's so deep that he's swimming in it. And I think that's what the kind of depths that God wants us to dig into. And there's no shortcuts with that. It's like it's not like you pray and you're there. There's a process of digging deeper and pushing in further. And I don't know any other way of getting into his presence than to dig deep into his presence. That's the only way I've found it works. That there's a deeper place of praise and prayer that keeps faith growing and that keeps faith going. And it has to be going into that deeper place. Ephesians 6 says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. You know, we're in a battle. We're in a spiritual battle. And it's only in places of prayer that we will go beyond the battle, that we will conquer the battle. We can't just fix these things in our own strength. We have to go and into a place of praise and a place of worship, which is beyond just a normal, I'm going to have my 5 minutes a day praying. It's a place of going deep into some deeper things of God. And I think he also talks about, it says, he was told that it's only by prayer and fasting that certain solutions can be dealt with. Certain solutions can be, and I'm not a massive faster, but I've gone through seasons when I have fasted. I know that when I fast, things shift. And so I encourage you to get into, if you're in a place of injustice, you're calling as a persistent widow, you're calling on the Father, then I encourage you to get into a place of fasting and praying and fasting. And it's there that faith grows as we dig deeper and we continue to contend for those answers that we are seeking as we go into that place. And I've got my 5 P's for you for today that I think are just helpful ways for faith. So for faith to keep growing, we need to dig in, but there's a place of private devotion, place of prayer and study, not just a verse a day that we fit in around everything else, but where God gave us 2 ears and he gave us 1 mouth. And he wants us to use those 2 ears to be able to listen to him, to find place where we can listen to God in his presence, and to be, there's a lot to be said about us developing the art of listening to God in prayer and hearing what's on God's heart rather than telling God what we want, because that's often the way it goes. And I've got a little diagram here which shows a listening, how we can, so this is the first one with us on this side, and often this is how we can pray. We can pray wanting the things we've decided what we know is best, and then we go to God and ask him for his power and his resources for our best to happen. That's what we can do. But when that doesn't happen, sometimes we'll go to a holy person. Oh, maybe if I go to that person, they pray for it, then it might happen, and they can speak to God on my behalf, and then God will get me the answer I want. That's not actually the way that God wants us to do. He says, as we get into a place, the second diagram, to seek God, seek God's will, seek that he knows best, that he knows the concerns of he knows the concerns of the situation. As we get into that deeper place, then we understand what God's will is, and God allows us to have the power and resources to be able to get through that situation. Sometimes it's not always the answer we want, but God enables us and gives us the resources. As we dig deeper, our hearts are aligned with his. John 12:49 says, "For I did not speak on my own accord, but the Father who sent me commanded me what to say and how to say it." James 1:5 says, "If anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all." I remember that there was a time when I wasn't sensing God's presence in my life, and so I set out every morning that I was going to walk around the block and I was going to seek God for my answer, I wanted to sense his Holy Spirit. And so I got up and I'm getting up earlier now. This is before kids came along. And so I'm walking around the block, and then 4th week in, I've heard nothing. I'm like, this is a waste of time. This is a waste of time. And as I got 4th morning, and I just heard God say, he says, do you remember that time you used to take the money from the till when you worked at that hotel? I was like, oof. Don't know if I want to listen to you anymore, God. Nope, I'm okay, I don't need to hear you. It's so good. And I was like, wow. Like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, there's years between this happening and me doing this. And I just felt the conviction of God's Spirit on my life. And so I went through this, like, oh, I don't want to listen to that. And then I built up the courage after a few weeks to phone up my old manager. And I'm thinking, if I phone up my old manager, he's an older guy now, I might kill him. Like, I'd give him a heart attack. So I thought, I'll phone his daughter, because I knew her well. She was the manageress. So I phoned up the manageress, and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I've become a Christian now. I want to tell you that this is what I used to do. I used to take the tips and put them in my own pocket rather than giving them in. And she was like, Chris, what are you talking about? She said, you deserve those tips. You deserve that money. We shouldn't have been taking it off you. You were a great lad. But you just don't feel bad about it. If you want to give some money to charity, do that or whatever. So that's what I did. I gave some money to charity. But do you know what? I felt a release, and I felt like God had done something in my heart which unlocked it. And it was like, I think sometimes God might point stuff out to us that we don't want to hear. And actually, that can be stuff that's blocking us from hearing what God's saying to us. So sometimes there's a bigger picture that we don't see. Sometimes we can be asking for God to do something, or for a situation of breakthrough. And sometimes we're pestering God and we're knocking on that door for God to open it, but God ain't opening the door because there's one further ahead, which is what is the one he wants you to go through. So do not fret. Keep going to that place of prayer. And it's in a place of private devotion that we'll find it. The next P is providential relationships, loving, accountable relationships, people who will push you and challenge you to keep going and to keep growing, people who you can be yourself with. And, I'm thankful that I've got people in my life that I can go to. Dave was one of my people who I would go to, and he knew me warts and all, and it was difficult. But I'm so thankful for Jonathan, who is kind of my person who I'm going to as a person who is just able to pour out my heart to him. And we need those people in our lives. If we don't have those people, then it can be a very lonely place. People who really know you and you can be yourself around. So if you haven't got that person who you can be honest with about where you're at, then you need to find that person, because they can help your faith to keep growing and to keep going. The next one is pivotal circumstances. So this is where we depend on God's character. Every relationship is built on trust. Trusting, and it's only in a place of in that relation when you spend time with them that trust develops. And we can see from past experiences, how that person's character has remained true, as we've seen. And so in pivotal circumstances in our lives, we can go back to those points and point to the character that was the thing that was consistent. And God is consistent. His character is true. Our relationships are grow when every relationship is built on trust. We can trust our relationship with God. We can trust his character. We can trust him to break through again. So, if just remember that God is true. His track record is good. If there's been a situation where you're struggling, then there's a bank of stories where he's been faithful, and he will come through again. And we can trust in God in pivotal circumstances. I remember when I was at school, my Spanish teacher once, when I walked into the lesson, and my Spanish teacher, she says, "Get out." And I said, "What?" She says, "Get out." I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "It's for what you're going to do." I said, "That's a bit unfair." But she was obviously having a bad day. She knew that I was a class clown. And so she kicked me out before I even got into the lesson, which I think that's pretty bad. That's not good. And she came out of the lesson. She went, "Right, today I need you to be on your best behavior. Don't give me any grief." Okay? But she knew my track record. She knew that I was a nightmare, yeah? And that I was going to ruin that lesson for her today. And so she said, she kicked me out. If that's ever happened to anyone before. Has it happened to you? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, same Spanish teacher, yeah. Oh, she was a nightmare. She kicked me out because she was looking at my past record. Well, I want us to remind us that God's track record is good. And when we hit difficult circumstances, we can trust that God is faithful. And we can trust that he keeps his promises. Finally, a personal ministry. Personal ministry is like a faith muscle. So if we don't use it, we'll lose it. Faith is like a muscle that grows. And it's something that as we step out in personal ministry, our faith grows in him. And as he puts us in situations and pushes us and stretches us, then we'll continue to grow as we step out. It's a double-edged kind of thing. You've got to almost like, you can't grow without stepping out, but you've got to keep kind of stepping out in order to grow. So, and it's fear that stops us from keeping going. And there's this book which I've mentioned before. It's called The Cloud and the Line. And I'm just going to read an extract from it. So Paul Gibbs, in his book, in The Cloud and the Dot, says, when talking about he's talking about the parable of the talent, he says, the devil preyed upon the third servant's fear of disappointment of a fearful master. I knew you to be a hard man, and I was afraid. Remember, we talked about in our parable, God is not a hard man or an unjust God. He's a loving Father He's a good, good Father. So this is the context of this. So, I'm going to read this for you. Okay. So, fear is like a magnet. Just as faith activates my God, so fear activates my enemy. As though he lies in wait like a lion on an African plain, watching a herd of antelope, searching for the weaker or slower on which to pounce. Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. When God provides an opportunity or invites us to participate in some way, our fears may cause us to pass up that request. We say in our minds, I'll take the next opportunity instead. The problem is that when the next opportunity comes, our enemy will go back to that same fear. He will push the same button as before. We must break the cycle before missed opportunities turns to tragic regret. I wish I didn't have a personal story for this point, but I do. My grandfather was simply a hero to me. George Gibbs grew up never knowing his parents. Perhaps this is why he had such a love for his own family. Grandpops, as he became known to me, was my favorite grandparent. I think it was something about the way he would do anything to make me laugh. He looked like the professor from Back to the Future, with his tall, wiry frame and his mop of white hair. Making me happy seemed to make him happy. When I was in my early 20s, Grandpops was diagnosed with cancer. When I heard the news, I immediately got on the train in Manchester to visit him in London. Sitting by his bedside, I could see this hero of mine who could once grasp a lamppost and hold himself horizontal in the air was now a much weaker man. We talked about various things before he finally told me he knew he was going to die. He wondered if I could tell him how to go to heaven. The funny thing is how I can talk to thousands of strangers about my faith, but with complete courage and conviction. Yet my nerve goes when I wish to broach the subject with a single family member. What I should have done was simply share the truth of the gospel with him. Instead, I suddenly felt embarrassed by such an immediate question and was reminded of the self-indulgent life I had only recently turned away from. Who was I to teach anyone? I compromised. I handed him my Bible and pointed out passages that he should read, telling him that he would find answers in the words of these pages. A few hours later, I caught the train back up north. Within a few weeks, Grandpops sent me a letter. His hand had obviously lost its firmness, and I struggled to read the scribbled words. Dear Paul, thank you for the present. It was one of the nicest things anyone has ever given me, but I don't understand it. I am still a little afraid. Could you please explain it to me? It was like a bullet to my heart. I immediately planned to return to London and do what I should have done in the first place. But before I could go, my mother awoke me early in the morning to tell me that Grandpops had passed away. The second worst day of my life was the day of his funeral. As I entered the church, my grandmother came to me with tears in her eyes and asked, Paul, where is he? I wanted to say, don't worry, Nanny. He is in heaven. Heaven is a wonderful place. Let me describe it to you. Every tear will be wiped away. But instead, I struggled. And with much sadness, I uttered the words, I don't know. The accuser will accuse you before God, using every sticky label he can find. He will convince you that you have lost the right to be strategic. He doesn't want you to be stagnant, to lie low, to stand still. But you and I have a moral duty. We must share what has been shared with us. Nights Must never be afraid. The results are far too. Um, the results are far too fearful to contemplate. You get that? Have you got your own story of a missed opportunity where we didn't share faith with someone that needed to hear that hope? Will faith be found on the earth? We can give up because of many reasons. We can lose hope. We can't deal with maybe the setbacks, but we must keep going. You know what? Al shared a story on Connect All In this week about a guy called Gareth who came to this church a few times. And you know what? I'd seen Gareth. I'd seen him in the shop, in that shop over there, and I kind of didn't place him. And then so I said hello to him. He was stood in one queue, and I was stood in the other queue. And then as I walked out the shop, I saw him walking down the end of the channel. I just saw his silhouette going into the distance, and I nearly shouted because I remembered his name. Oh, Gareth! And then Al told me he took his own life last week. I'm like, what? There was an opportunity. There was an opportunity to share hope with this guy, and I feel horrible about it because we never know. We never know when the last time is that we're going to get an opportunity to share the gospel with people, that story of hope. So faith grows when we do the stuff, when we share what we need to share with people. The gospel, this gospel delivery thing, like it seems like quite twee, like it's not something I would feel like I would do, but it's so important. So important that these people find out about Jesus. Because if we don't tell them, who's going to tell them? We need to go and we need to tell people. And I know everyone's not a door knocker, I get it. But there are people that we do need to share the gospel with. Because if we don't know if that story is a silhouette walking down the road, you're never going to see him again. We need to get to a place of being confident to share our faith, to keep bringing those people before God. Keep knocking on the door. Keep going for it. Keep asking God to bring salvation to those people that are lost souls, to make the most of every opportunity. So will faith be found on the earth? Keep praising. Keep your private devotion of prayer. Keep listening. Get good people around you. Know that God is faithful in the big circumstances as well as the little, those pivotal circumstances. And keep your personal ministry hot. Keep it hot. Keep the gospel hot. Because the gospel is the power of God for salvation. It's not our words. It's what God is doing. Somebody's waiting for that hope. Somebody's waiting for salvation. Somebody's waiting for the message of Jesus. He's a good, good Father who is quick to give justice to those who intercede day and night. I'm just going to play this one song. It's an old school classic. And it's from Matt Rudman. It's called Deep Calls to Deep, but it's encouraging us to keep going for deeper things of God. So if we could just play that, it'd be great.
You, God, I thrust inside.